Let us first understand the role and importance of banks. Banks are specialized financial institutions whose role is to accept deposits and give credit. They play a crucial role in the economy by way of circulation of money received in the form of deposits, and then they further give loans and advances. Banks have existed for a long period and they perform this function of safeguarding people's wealth in their own coffers. And this has been happening for a millennium. Earlier, goldsmiths used to perform this task of providing a secure place to people to store their wealth, which could be withdrawn on demand by the public, for which they used to charge a commission either in cash or in gold itself. The system later grew to a more complex form where the gold was later loaned out so that they could make profits. Today, banks not only accept deposits and give loans but also provide more sophisticated services which have the possible innovation and expansion through which such loans and advances could lead to expansion of the financial markets with due course of time. Banks perform a special task of tailoring contracts and modifying existing contracts between parties into a new contract. They are able to convert short-term contracts into long-term ones through spreading of the risk and also by the transfer of liabilities from one party to another. After studying this model, you shall be able to understand the functioning of commercial banks, know about the structure of Indian banks, know about the development in lending and capital requirements. Now we shall discuss the functions of banks. The first function is liquidity and profit generation. Commercial banks as financial intermediaries perform an important function of bridging the gap between people who have excess funds and people who want to borrow these excess funds so that they could invest it. With this function, they not only create liquidity but also help to reduce the cost of transactions, which would be very high in the absence of such specialized financial institutions. Banks are able to achieve this through economies of scale, and they are able to actually reduce the cost of getting loans, and this they are able to do by managing what is called the spread. The spread is the difference between the interest that they earn and the interest that they give on the deposits. During performing this function, they earn income, and that, as we have explained, is in the form of interest. Apart from interest earnings, they also have certain fee-based activities on which they get fees or commission, and in certain cases it is in the form of discounts. They also ensure the flow of money throughout the economy, and the management of these liquid funds is something through which they make their profit margins. Deposits are liabilities of the banks, but they are able to convert these liabilities into assets in the form of the loans and advances. The second function of banks is management of reserves. The deposits made by public, as we have said, are the liabilities of the bank, which need to be repaid after some time on demand. A bank cannot keep accepting deposits without creating a scope for profit generation by way of loans and advances. During this process, the liquidity is created, and banks of course cannot lend the entire deposits that they have, and moreover loans are sometimes given also for long term purposes. There could be a demand for the deposits in between, and if the deposits are recalled by the depositors, then as per their terms and conditions, the banks are obliged to give the cash requirement which is demanded by the depositors. Therefore, to avoid such a situation where they do not possess the liquidity which is demanded by the depositors, the central bank makes a mandatory provision that commercial banks should hold a part of their deposits in the form of what is called a cash reserve. Banks also hold reserves over and above the legal requirement, which as we said is the cash reserve ratio, and this system is one which keeps the money in the form of reserves and it is loaned, and this system is known as the fractional reserve system. The third is creation of credit. This is a very important function of banks. Capital is necessary for economic growth, and firms are in constant need of funds to take up productive activity. With the expansion of human needs, households also need funds for sometimes for consumption purposes. Banks are able to provide credit for different purposes with different term structures. That is, they can provide loans for short term, for medium term, and for the long term. This function is of utmost importance as banks are institutions which are entrusted with the capability of creating loan or credit. This process is known as the process of credit creation, and as we will be able to see, it is also known as deposit creation. The ability of banks to leads to the expansion of what is called alternately called either as money, credit, or by one logic it could also be known as deposits. So it's a main function of banks to create credits or money. Apart from the above conventional functions, modern commercial banks have expanded their operations. Banks also play an active role in the money market. There are certain short-term credit instruments which are traded in the money market. Some of these instruments have a term of only 1 to 2 days. Therefore, the banks are the institutions, financial institutions, which are intermediaries between the flow of these monetary assets or short-term instruments from the central bank to the money market. The volume of savings accepted by banks also make them very important for the financial stability of the nation, especially the interest in the interest of the government, and for helping the regulatory authorities to look after the financial health and operations in the economy. The information that banks possess is quite amazing, it's quite immense. The information is one basic resource that a bank possesses. Now, if there is asymmetric information in the banking system, then this becomes a big drawback for the financial system, and this may become the root cause of distress in the financial system. Banks can play a very important role in mitigating this information gap by formulating new contracts on the basis of the existing ones, and can even tailor them as per the specifications to reduce risk. Thus, every important bank is interdependent, every important function of the bank is interdependent and important. So deposits are related to advances, advances are related to the creation of money and so on. So these are all the functions of a commercial bank. To understand the Indian banking system, let us first discuss the structure of the Indian banking system. The Indian banking structure begins at the apex with the central bank, which is known as the Reserve Bank of India. Then comes the next layer, which is that of scheduled and non-scheduled commercial banks. Scheduled commercial banks in India constitute those banks which have been included in the second schedule of the Reserve Bank of India Act 1934. These could either be private banks or public sector banks. There was a total of 89 commercial banks in the year 1951, which grew to around 291 banks in the year. However, in the year 2004, the number fell to 173 in the year 2012. The overall deposit to national income ratio grew from 10% in 1955-56 to almost 74% in 2005-6. As per the recent statistics, the overall deposits for scheduled commercial banks grew at the rate of 15% during 2011-12. Banks had around 64,000 billion rupees worth of deposits outstanding, and they had loans and advances to the tune of more than 50,000 billion rupees. And these banks earned an income of somewhere in the tune of over 74,000 billion by way of profits. The number of offices of scheduled commercial banks were to the tune of 98,000 and more. The per capita deposit of these banks grew from rupees 88 in the year 1969 to over 48,000 in 2012. Almost 32% of the advances were directed towards the priority sector by these banks in 2012. The credit deposit ratio has remained fairly stable at the level of 78%. There were about 27 public sector banks excluding regional rural banks in 2002, 196 regional rural banks, 30 private sector banks and about 44 foreign banks. As per the 2012 statistics, 28 public sector banks with 133 RRBs were present. There were also 27 private banks and 29 foreign banks in India during this period. After studying the structure, now let us discuss the liabilities of banks. And there are three main liabilities of commercial banks. This is the deposits by the public in the form of demand deposits or long-term deposits. Deposits can be divided into the following categories. First of all, we have current deposits or current accounts, checkable deposits with unrestricted withdrawals from the bank are known as current deposits. The banks provide for overdraft facility, which means that the holder of the account can actually get a withdrawal which is in excess of the deposit that the customer is maintaining with the bank. The accounts and the non-interest payments lead to a certain chain which leads to an increase in the money supply. Therefore, such current deposits or demand deposits are also included in the money supply. The savings deposits are accounts which pay interest, and the account operates in a similar fashion to the current account, except there are some restrictions on the number of withdrawals. Then we have term deposits, which are long-term deposits or fixed deposits with different periods of maturity. In 1994, around 73% of the total deposits were owned by individuals. They owned about 90% of the savings deposits and 78% of the term deposits. The current accounts are held mainly by enterprises, firms, corporations to ease their process of transactions. The current deposits as a fraction of the total deposits reduced to 11% in 2002 from 51% in 1951. Whereas this proportion increased, the proportion increased for savings deposits and for term deposits at the rate of 24% and 65% respectively. The short-term deposits around 36% of the overall term deposits, while the long-term deposits fell to 24%. The bank-wise classification source, the highest growth was registered by private banks at the rate of about 38% per annum, followed by the foreign banks at 32% per annum, and public sector banks grew at the rate of around 23% during 2006 and 2007. The deposits have seen a rise in absolute size due to several factors: rise in national income, extension of banking facilities to new categories, increase in banking awareness, the rise in returns from banks, the deficit financing, rise in credit creation, flow of foreign funds, and increased competition. The non-deposit liabilities of banks include borrowing and debt from the domestic market and foreign currency. The overall borrowings of the commercial banks in 2012 were of the tune of more than 8,000 billion. Now let us examine, as we said earlier, the deposits which are liabilities get converted into assets. So the assets of banks include cash balances, assets with the bank and other banks, investments in government securities and other bank credit. Investments are specifically classified as SLR or non-SLR securities. That is, there are certain types of government investments which are statutory, and therefore this is known as the statutory liquidity ratio. The former, the SLR, includes securities and other approved securities have to maintain their investment to deposit ratio, and this is stipulated to be around 25%. The reason for this has been the raising of fiscal deposit, imposition of capital adequacy norms, and a rise in foreign currency. The non-SLR investments include commercial paper, shares, mutual funds and debentures, and the scheduled commercial banks invested around 900 billion in non-SLR securities in 2002-03. The overall investment amounted to about 5% of their total assets. The bank credit finances major projects of the economy, including infrastructure developments, agricultural projects and so on. Banks also provide retail credit for consumption purposes, such as for automobile loans, for education, for housing and so on. Apart from the loans to consumers for such consumption needs, the bank also provides overdraft facilities from which the banks can withdraw, from which the customers could withdraw by up to a limit which is set by the banks. Commercial banks have expanded their operations and are supporting business activities through purchasing of bills discounted. Banks can rediscount these bills and raise funds for themselves from the Reserve Bank of India. In 1973, the cash credit was rupees 30 billion, which increased to 2100 billion in 2006. The overdraft extended from around 6 billion to around 600 billion in 2006. In this year, the total amount of bills discounted was around 700 billion rupees. Now let us understand the developments in the credit. Lending for banks was based on the working capital needs. The term lending by banks was fixed by RBI at rupees 50 crores for a single bank, single project, and 200 crores for a single project by all banks in 1993. These limits were removed in 1997. The lending rate of commercial banks were deregulated in 1994 with the introduction of something called the prime lending rate or the PLR. Reserve Bank of India removed this system of the benchmark prime lending rate in 2003 due to transparency concerns. Banks are allowed to set aside lending rates along with the floating rates on some loan products. This was a part of liberalizing the policy framework for banks. The sectoral composition of credit could be divided on the basis of private sector, rural versus urban, industrial versus agricultural, and large versus small scale. The share of industries in bank credit increased from 34% in 1951 to 68% in 1968, but it fell to 42% in 2002-03. Within industries, the large share, most of the credit went to large and medium industries, and that of small industries was initially not much, but it increased later on considerably. The rise of productivity of industries led to the expansion and better utilization of credit. The share of agriculture saw a rise from 2% in 1951 to around 11% in 2006. A rise of services as an important component of the Indian GDP has seen a rise in the credit to this sector to the tune of 23% in 2003. The export sector remained a special focus of bank credit, with the facilities for refinancing, credit guarantees, concessional rates of interest, and favorable repayment terms being extended to the export sector from time to time. This sector, though it remains necessary for the progress of the economy, but the credit facilities have been utilized more for domestic purposes than for export promotion. Personal loans and housing loans have increased sharply since 2002-03. The central bank and the government have initiated credit easing with the rescheduling of short loans and medium and long-term loans. Of course, the higher goals for banking still remain the priority sector. We shall now discuss a major problem of commercial banking in India, and that is of non-performing assets. And as it would be apparent, and as we have been saying, that the economics of a bank depends upon how they can successfully translate their deposits into assets, and unless they have assets, they cannot make their profits. So now we shall be discussing NPAs or non-performing assets and the profitability. Interest income is actually the main income or revenue or profit that a bank gets, and this forms about 80% of the overall income of banks. The amount of interest income in 2007 in the Indian banking system was something to the tune of 2,37,000 crores. From the expenditure side, the interest payment formed a major portion of the overall expenditure, and the overall net earnings for the banks increased from 14 crores in 1951 to 31,000 crores in 2007. In 2011-12, the net interest income was rupees 2249 billion, and with rupees 817 billion as net profits. The net interest margin, which is also known as the spread, remained constant around 2.8% between 2011 and 2013. The return on assets, defined as the ratio of net profits to the average total assets, stood at a very small percentage, less than even 1%, that is 0.88%. And the return on equity, which is defined as the net profit to the average total equity, stood at 15.33%, and for the public sector banks. These ratios were 1.63 and 15.27 for private sector banks in the year 2011-12. Looking at the cost of deposits, and these ratios have grown from 0.9 in the year 1951 to 6.28 in the year 2011. The spread, or the difference between the cost of funds and the return of funds, stood at 3.63%. The biggest worry for the Indian banking system today has been the rise of non-performing assets. Estimates for the bank's non-performing assets differ amongst institutions, and the methods of calculation also differ. As per RBI, the estimate of non-performing assets to loans ratio was 11.4% in 2001. This has declined to 2.5% in 2007, but slightly increased to 3.6% in 2013. The amount of NPAs has reduced till 2007, but after the global financial crisis in 2007, it increased and has grown to a sizable amount in 2013. These are some of the features of the growth of Indian banking industry. Now let us consider another important dimension which is relevant for banking, and this is known as the capital requirement. Banks are basically dealing with it's a risky business. Banks accept deposits and they lend it on to others as credit and loans and advances. So at both ends they do undertake a risk. So with the increasing risk, and then markets are also becoming more risky with the opening up of markets, with competition and so on. Therefore, it is very important, because banks hold people's money. Therefore, to ward against any untoward taking place in the financial sector in banks, it is important to have a system of capital requirements. Now, this system of capital requirements has come up by virtue of an international agreement known as the Basel norms. The Basel norms were started in 1988, which imposed a minimum capital requirement for commercial banks under what is known as capital adequacy norms. The risk-based capital adequacy norms was adopted by several countries across the world, and the current norm, which is prescribed through the Basel norms, is operating through three pillars, namely the minimum capital requirement, the supervisory review, and disclosure for market participants and investors. Capital adequacy resorts to sufficient capital required to cover the losses arising out of the changing asset quality due to inherent risks. The risks are broadly classified as credit risk, market risk and operational risk. The capital is classified into two categories. The first is known as Tier 1 capital and the second is known as Tier 2 capital, depending upon the quality of capital required. Capital is classified into two categories, namely Tier 1 and Tier 2 capital based on the quality of capital required. Capital funds under Basel I stood at rupees 7,810 billion, which were increased to 7,700 or reduced to 7,700 billion under Basel II in 2012. The risk-weighted assets were 60,376 billion and 54,621 billion respectively. The capital to risk weighted ratio has remained above the prescribed limit of 9%. Some of the major reforms undertaken for the banking sector after 1991 are as follows. Decontrolling of the interest rate of commercial banks and on non-resident external rupee account deposits, which facilitates to the banks to set up their own interest rate and to free the interest rate as far as foreign exchange positions and limits are concerned. The access to capital market for raising debt, introduction of prudential norms for income recognition, asset classification and the creation of a provision for bad debts and strict disclosure norms. The principle of mark to market to be followed for securities and the setting up of the banking ombudsman to look into the public grievances and to improve customer services. For encouraging the private sector banks and foreign sector banks, they were allowed to enter into the Indian banking system and certain transparent portfolio norms were allowed for the portfolio diversification. For short-term liquidity and the introduction of short-term interbank call money market, the auction-based reverse repo along with a swifter money transfer and payment settlement are also some of the measures which were liberalized for the banking system. Development of the market for securitized assets or dematerialization, risk-based capital adequacy norms, international best practices, the know your customer provisions, the settlement of procedures for NPAs and debt restructuring and the SARFAESI Act and the Recovery Tribunal are also some policies which were adopted for improvement and liberalization of the banking sector. The introduction of corporate governance norms, negotiated dealing system, the real-time gross settlement are all again systems by which the commercial banking in India became a much better managed and at the same time a more liberalized sector. Commercial banks operate and compete with the global banks and hence a higher competition and strict regulation forces them to constantly innovate and not just face and withstand the competition, and they themselves are trying to retain their profits and lower their cost and increase their profit margins. And along with this, there is an expansion of technology and for creating safer and more secure financial systems, and some of the major innovations and adoption of new technologies include the following: participation certificates to sell a part of loans made by banks which were later discontinued, introduction of interbank participation for short-term liquidity and which were included for the compliance under CRR and SLR requirements. Multiple bank-based lending to single large borrowers to spread the risk, to reduce bank monopoly, to extend knowledge and expertise among leading banks, and the pooling of funds. Credit cards have made a remarkable addition to the banking innovation, adding to another source of transactions for commercials and customers, enabling them to deal with overdraft facilities and as a newer medium of exchange. New checks are cleared through a mechanism called MICR, Magnetic Ink Character Recognition System. Then we have computerized clearing houses, interbank information networks, which is known as BankNet, and there are certain systems known as SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications. Banks also have all banks have, commercial banks have computerized their daily operations. There is the establishment of what is called a local area bank on the lines of RRBs for a decentralized banking system. Then the introduction of risk-based management system, capital adequacy norms as per the worldwide Basel norms, and the recommendation of the credit rating framework. Now, let us sum up what all we have studied in this module. Banks are rare in one sense. They are special financial institutions, they are intermediaries. Their role, responsibility and their function is unparalleled because the other financial institutions are not allowed to do certain functions which commercial banks do. The main distinguishing feature is that commercial banks, one, have a dual objective of profitability as well as liquidity or stability, and two, they are the only institutions which are allowed to have checkable deposits. Now, banks reduce the risk both to the borrower and to the depositors. Though through economies of scale, the banks are able to reduce the transaction cost, and this goes to the benefit of both the borrowers and the depositors. And through their operations, through their efficiency, they are able to also earn profits. And the main functions of banks are to create credit, liquidity, and to manage their assets and profitability, and also to manage the monetary reserves in the economy, of course along with the Reserve Bank or the central bank. The Indian banking system has got several tiers. At the top we have the central bank, which is the Reserve Bank of India. Then we have scheduled and non-scheduled commercial banks, and amongst these scheduled commercial banks we have public sector banks, private sector banks, and foreign banks. The liabilities of a bank include deposits and to some extent other borrowings, but these deposits are converted into loans and advances, and the commercial banks also have certain diversified short-term credit instruments which they use for governing their financial stability and financial management. Commercial banks have seen a rise in the business which can be measured and seen in terms of their investment deposit ratio, the net interest margin, and of course there has also been an increase in the rise, and therefore accordingly banks have now adhered to the Basel norms which are internationally accepted, and these are known as capital adequacy norms. So banks have been maintaining around 9% as capital adequacy. Of course, there has been an increase in the non-performing assets, but recently the trend of non-performing assets has been declining. The financial sector reforms has seen various measures such as deregulation of interest rate, entry to foreign and private banks, and deregulation of the money market instruments and so on. Apart from this, a major thrust has been towards technological improvement, technological upgradation, and the infrastructure such that the banking system is now working through high advanced technologies which benefit both the customers and the banking system in general.